would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a late release edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. I'm going to start off with an apology. Normally the show gets popped out automatically at 2 a.m. in the morning. Unfortunately, I made some bad lunch decisions yesterday. And I think I ended up with food poisoning or something. Feeling better this morning, but man, made it impossible to make it through my day yesterday. So here I am, and since I had a little bit of bandwidth, Fridays I typically get a little bit more bandwidth than normal. I thought I'd go ahead and do a show, so maybe it's the drive home today instead of the drive to work. Again, apologies for not being on the regular schedule. I try to very religiously stick to that because I know it sets expectations. If you'd like to get in contact with me, head on over to therebelbroker.com. From there, you can do a variety of wonderful things. You can send me a message. Just click on Contact the Rebel Broker. Submit any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. Or you can email me directly at therebel@therebelbroker.com. You can also join in on the survey that supports the show. It's basically just a demographic survey that helps me put the show out there for potential sponsors to get the show growing. And if you participate, each month we are doing a $50 Amazon.com gift card drawing. We just did one this week. Congratulations to Phil. We did one last week. So far we've handed out $100. To get in on that, just click that button. When you're asked your email address 2 different times, use the same email address, and then just answer the questions on the survey, and you're in. And the next time we do one, which will be in December, you will have a possibility to get drawn and win yourself $50. From there, you can also support the show in other ways. There's going to be a menu there that says support the show. Right now, I think it says the store, but from there, you'll be able to click it and you'll be able to visit the sponsors page, or you can visit the Amazon.com store page. And if you're going to shop at Amazon anyway, you may as well use my store, right? You'll get the exact same stuff, the exact same prices. The difference being that it will provide a little bit of support to the show, and I will be forever in your debt. So there you go. All right. And finally, if you'd like to join the Rebel Underground, just text the word Rebel Broker, all one word, Rebel Broker, to the number 44222, and then you will get your hands on some exclusive content and also getting an inside scoop into what's going on with the show. And also you'll get access to articles and different commentary that's really not going to be showing up in the mainstream show so much. Loving the new tool that I got my hands on to create the content I've been promising for so long in terms of having sort of a visual guide on how to go through the process of analyzing a property. It has inspired me to write down a whole bunch of different other cool projects that we could do. Most of this is going to end up living on YouTube, I'm guessing. But keep an eye on either my YouTube page or my website at therebelbroker.com for more information on that. You'll also probably start seeing more things getting posted at therebelbroker.com than just the show. I'm considering the idea of doing an article either once a week or once a month. I'm not sure how often I'll be able to do it, but there will be some additional content getting posted there, and it may just actually come down to videos getting posted. So just keep an eye out for that. I'm definitely in growth mode, and I'm anxious to bring you all right along with me. This is a show that I'd thought about for a long time. We've briefly brushed up against this topic before, and I wanted to sort of run over real quickly. An article came out from CNBC where they ran down what the Republican and Democratic ticket meant for the housing industry. So I'm going to, of course, include a link to that article in the show notes for today's show. And I thought I'd go over it real quickly here on the show. And boy, I tell you, I have never in my life seen an election cycle like this. We're all going to be hopefully heading out there on Tuesday. Some of us have already voted. I know I did. I voted by mail a couple of weeks ago, and ended up not voting for the Republican or the Democrat. So, and I didn't vote for Jill Stein either. So it gets narrowed down real quickly once you go that far. But it's absolutely ridiculous. This will be my only political commentary. Well, okay, I can't guarantee that. This will be my first political commentary for today's show. Talk about nothing but a list of horrible choices. You know those towns that elect dogs to mayor? And there's some town somewhere in the Midwest that's actually had a dog for mayor for like 5 years. I'm wondering if that's an option at this point. All right, so let's jump into this horrible freak show of a situation. And there's definitely interesting comments made here, interesting assumptions made in terms of the person who wrote this article seems to have some definite opinions on what the government should or shouldn't be doing. But let's try to focus really on what these folks seem to think that they're going to be doing. Both candidates claim they will grow the economy. Housing is central to that as it contributes to the economy in various ways. And, I agree with that. I occasionally will get listeners who want to give me a hard time about not equating house growth or house construction with growing in the economy. But it's not a leading indicator, and it's not a thing that feeds growth unless you have buyers, which we do. It's a thing that results from good growth, because in order to sell homes, you have to have people who can buy them. And in order to buy them, you have to have a job that pays you enough to afford a house. So then you have to decide which comes before the other. Which problem has to get solved before the other problem gets solved? It's really not as complicated as the chicken and the egg. It really is. If you do not have enough qualified buyers, you will not have enough of a pool of people to buy homes, so that homes will need to be built. Now, we've got far more buyers right now than we do homes being built. The inventory is ridiculously low. And in order to really push everything over, we need to see more homes getting built. And I guess the argument comes down to, at that point, well, what part should the government play in that? Should the government be out there building homes, or should the government get completely out of the way of developers and allow them to build homes without a lot of the things we've talked about on this show in terms of really prohibitive regulations? And, we've talked about the rate at which regulations have been laid onto us. And just since 2000, the costs incurred to conform with regulations has skyrocketed, which is one of the main contributors to housing costs. And I don't think anyone's going to argue if, for instance, if I'm trying to sell a home and I want to try to sell a home that was built in 1992 versus a home that was built in 2003, despite the fact that one had way more regulations it had to comply with, I don't think anyone's going to feel less safe living in that 1992 house, assuming they're right next door to each other, so everything else being equal, right? I know I wouldn't. I wouldn't feel uncomfortable going into a 1965 house. At least from a structural standpoint. Might I worry about lead in the paint or asbestos on the acoustic ceiling, or not the acoustic, but that little speckly stuff on the ceiling? Yeah, I might. But I think you're getting my point. I don't see us getting a huge payoff for the additional costs that we incur. And be assured, developers are not the ones who really bear the brunt of those costs. If you think that developers simply absorb those costs and continue to sell their product at the same price, you are mistaken. You are absolutely paying those. So ultimately, these are like an invisible tax on you. And it also discourages other folks from getting involved in property development because of all the compliance issues that are involved. So And the reality is, I don't see either party. I don't see any of the parties. I mean, we could go through the entire list. I don't see anyone who's talking about that. I don't see anyone saying the government needs to be less involved. Apparently, everyone in politics believes that only good things come from their involvement in every aspect of your life involving your house. So we can move from there. Boosting home ownership means making mortgages more affordable and more accessible, which translates into a lot of the things we've talked about. Quote, I think that means lowering FHA premiums, cutting government-sponsored enterprise guarantee fees, doing things to make mortgages cheaper. It also means eliminating the perception out there that people can't qualify for credit, said Jarrett Sayberg, managing director of Cohen Group, a financial services company. Well, that's an interesting statement. It is as easy now to get a loan, almost as easy as it was back before the downturn, but in different ways, right? We've talked about how the credit rating has been manipulated so that now it's artificially being made higher by including things in that evaluation that aren't really credit-related numbers. We've talked about how there are now 3% loans available without insurance involved. So you're having these different options where there's not even mortgage insurance involved, and those are still ultimately being backed by government-sponsored entities. So a lot of these fees they're talking about, a lot of the things this guy's talking about are already out there. So I'm not real sure what his deal is because a lot of what he's already talked about is already there. According to this article, Republican Donald Trump, a real estate mogul who has invested largely in hotel and multifamily housing development, has said even less about housing than Democrat Hillary Clinton, but the GOP platform is clearer when it comes to the financing side of the business. Quote, we're really seeing a lot more discussion about the things like reforming or rejecting Dodd-Frank, which was the financial reform bill. We've talked about that on this show before, and Dodd-Frank was a bad thing in general. We've seen a lot of discussion about easing regulatory burden on the industry, which was put on it by Dodd-Frank and by the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The contention seems to be that some of the rules established in Dodd-Frank and the CFPB make it difficult for qualified borrowers to get a loan and make it difficult for lenders to justify making loans because of the regulatory and litigation risk. There's other stuff built in there, but what's really interesting is this is solving the buyer creation side of the problem. And as you know, that's not the current problem. The current problem is homes that are being made available at a reasonable price. And the argument you can make right now is that by continuing to quote unquote solve the buyer side of the equation, you continue to increase the cost of homes. You create more buyer. And remember, this is the exact same dynamic that got us into trouble the last time. We artificially created more and more buyers, which increased the number of buyers per home on the marketplace, which skyrocketed prices that ultimately caused the downturn, which caused the crash because we were artificially making buyers. The goal here should be to make it super easy for developers to build homes and to do it with as little side costs. In other words, what I'm looking for is a scenario where it's really, as long as they have jumped through the permitting hoops and they're working within the limits set by the county, that's fine. As long as all that is done, everything else should be it. Once their plans are approved, they meet all the permit requirements, and they've done all the studies they were supposed to do, and maybe even eliminate a couple of those. That's it. There's no appeals process for people who don't own the land. There's no room for folks who live nearby to complain. If you're operating within the established rules, that should be it. Streamline that process. Get rid of the stuff that have it. From here, we say this, we will not add anything, but we may eliminate things that represent costs. All those cities and counties that are charging anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 just to build that house, stop charging that amount of money. All of those extra fees that are above and beyond that for some reason you only charge on developers that are building more than one home, get rid of them. Because once people have bought those homes and moved in, they're going to be paying property taxes. That represents an increase to you. The idea that you should be charging money up front for that is ridiculous. And it's hurting the people who want to buy those homes. So streamline the process, reduce regulation, make it easier to build the homes for the developers, make it cost less. So what I want is once a house comes out at the end of this process, I want the total cost of that house. When you get a list, I want it to be labor, wood, appliances, concrete, landscaping. And I don't want all these lines for bribe I had to pay to the county, bribe I had to pay for the city, regulatory costs. And if there are those columns, those numbers in those columns, they should be ridiculously small numbers. That's how you solve the problem. And again, neither one of the parties are going down that route. All right. Given that Trump's track record is all in multifamily housing, his thoughts on the single-family market, which comprises most of the nation's housing, is the big unknown. Quote, clearly his whole campaign is about growing the economy and smashing through regulations, so I think you could see a real upside with Trump, provided the economy and the other parts of his agenda don't derail it. Easing regulation of the banking industry is one thing, but neither Trump nor Clinton has said anything about reforming the mortgage market and dealing with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Clinton does have the advantage of building on a framework already in place under the Obama administration. And I think that's a worthy discussion to have, too. Do we want Fannie and Freddie to even continue to exist? Now, I'm pretty sure most of you who've listened to me for a while recognize that I actually don't see those organizations as particularly positive influences on the marketplace. They introduce a risk component that has been proven in the past to not be a good thing for us. So I'm all for minimizing them to the point where ultimately they're actually weaned out and that they're not participating. Clinton has advisors like Jim Parrott and Gene Sperling who have already put out white papers looking at what to do about Fannie and Freddie. There's already a perspective with what to do about the FHA program, so she is ready to hit the ground on day one. Clinton has also put forth, and by the way, if you look at those papers, they're about continuing to support those and grow them. Clinton has also put forth proposals to increase home ownership, which is now hovering near record lows. She has promised to provide down payment assistance to underserved communities. That's all subprime stuff. That is exactly what the goal was under Bush. A lot of the things that were encouraged by Bush, I think some of us probably still remember those press conferences where Bush was touting the home ownership rate when it hit 66 or 67%. And that is precisely what got us into this problem, into the problem that we just are slowly emerging from. We're going to go ahead and continue this discussion here in a second, but we're going to take a quick break, so don't go anywhere. We're going to continue sort of reviewing what it looks like we might see from the Democrat or the Republican, depending on who wins this race in terms of real estate. So stay right there. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We're trying to run down as best we can the details of what we might expect from a Clinton presidency or a Trump presidency. Not super easy to pin down because, frankly, not a whole lot of time has been devoted to exploring these topics from either candidate. And you kind of have to extrapolate and look at who their advisors are and what their advisors have suggested. Let's see. So now we were just sort of running through some of Clinton's stuff, specifically according to the plan that is likely to be part of Clinton's platform once she's elected, if she's elected. Quote, specifically, the plan would match up to $10,000 in savings for households who earn less than area median income to put towards a down payment on a first home. On the plus side, that will encourage some households to save more, but we doubt it will be a game changer in terms of getting more people into the housing ladder. The focus on down payments ignores the fact that it is the need for a high credit score which is preventing many Americans from buying. And even if the proposals do help more people to buy, the eventual outcome will be higher house prices, benefiting existing rather than potential homeowners. So a lot of interesting points made there that we've talked about on this show. Absolutely, it'll help, at least without giving the specifics of why that's the case. They are mentioning that it'll help to raise prices. But this person that they're speaking to, which is, I guess, researchers from Capital Economics, don't seem to realize that that's already happening in terms of credit scores being artificially increased. We've already covered that. So that's already happening. So anything that would push that further would do more damage than good. And I get that people push back on this. I understand the idea of wanting to feel good about making it easier for folks to purchase a home. But you also have to understand that in the vast majority of situations that I've come across in my career in real estate, and I've been doing this since the late 80s, just 88, 89 was my first year. And we've gone through some rough times since then, and nothing is worse than seeing folks who got themselves saddled with way more debt than they ever should have had in the first place. Being over leveraged is not a good thing. And if the market, we've already learned, or the lesson we should have learned is that the market does not always go up. The real estate market can absolutely go down. And there will be periods like we just went through where you can't weather that. It becomes too much of a burden. Or in a normal, stable market, some of these folks who we overburden with mortgages have any kind of problem in their family, anything that goes on, whether it's a loss of a job or whatever happens that affects their cash flow, suddenly they are ridiculously burdened to the point where they can't make their mortgage payments. We set it up for a horrible fall that we don't have to deal with, but they do. So in that initial moment when they first get that loan, we can all pat ourselves on the back for helping whoever that person is get a loan without ever having to live with the aftermath of folks suffering through a bankruptcy or some sort of ridiculous credit smash as a result of being overburdened with debt. Okay, let's see. The only other policy Trump has put forth that could tangentially touch housing is immigration reform. Immigrants are one of the largest drivers of household formation today. If a Trump presidency were to either slow the tide of immigrants or actually force immigrants already here to leave the country, that would trickle down to housing demand. In the end, housing is driven fundamentally by the strength or weakness of the economy, jobs, and income growth. Those are the primary drivers of both household formation and ownership. And I love that. I love that. She's totally right. Housing demand is currently very strong, but home builders are operating well below that demand level, and the mortgage market is in need of an overhaul. The housing crisis is over, but the recovery is not. So I would actually disagree. We talked yesterday about how secure mortgage investment was. Well, of course, because it's all based on the way mortgages were being written since the downturn, which is actual rational policies relating to how you regard credit. And of course, once each step we get that we're further away from the burning skin of the inferno that we left back in 2007 and 2008, suddenly we forget how hot that fire was, and we start embracing some of these policies that got us in that trouble last time. What I need to see from the candidates that I'm not seeing, and not seeing it from anybody, is this idea of how do you solve the supply side problem? Because no one's talking about that. We talk about it here on this show. Every once in a while, you hear someone out there in the world talking about it. But by and large, it's completely ignored. And I don't think anyone wants to go back to a world where the government's building housing. We've seen what happens with those. We've seen some of the projects that were tried in the 60s and 70s. Not a single one of those resulted in good things. So it's all about empowering the private sector to get it done. If you let them loose to do it, they will do it. And right now, the only problem that's being solved is at least in my marketplace, is the availability of rental properties, meaning apartments. So nothing really in the single family residential in terms of seeing big bubbles there. I realize this is not as informative as I'd hoped. I actually did a bit of research for this one, and that's really it. That's sort of the rundown of what we can expect. And to be really honest, in either case, most of it feels like more of the same. The Dodd-Frank thing is probably going to get beat up regardless of who wins. That seems like more of a Congress thing, and it's already been in the works now for 7 months. We've talked about it quite a few times on this show. So I think you get a little bit more of an insight into what Clinton might likely do based on this. But again, that's all aimed at wanting to bolster that home ownership number and is aimed more at the subprime thing, making money more accessible, regardless of the credit of the borrower, those types of things. So nothing that really instills me with a huge amount of confidence from anybody. Vote for who you will. Just go out there. If you haven't voted already, at least vote, at least exercise it. If you can't find anyone, and I hate to even admit this because I'm going to get so many every time I say anything like this. I actually had to write in the candidate that I voted for, but I want to sleep at night. So I only wanted to vote for someone who I believed in what they might do and disagreed with the least. So, and I realize everyone's going to say, "Oh, way to waste your vote," but you gotta. I'm not going to play that game anymore. I'm not going to vote for someone I don't support. So anyway, I hope you all are happy with your choice. I hope this is some at least generally helpful information. If I was going to offer a closing thought, I frankly don't see much of a difference. Frankly, I think no matter who wins, I think that the approach is still aimed at the headline of, I want to be able to say I increased the level of home ownership. I want to make things more available to whatever group that happens to be the one that they're courting at the moment. And I think all of that is done regardless of whether or not the steps you take to do that really make a lot of sense or are really very helpful for the folks that you're claiming to want to help. So maybe it's time to go drinking. just call it quits. All right, folks. Again, apologies for the late release of the show. I hope you're wrapping up your commute today with me. If so, thank you very much. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to you all next time.